Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, the East Bay's best podcast. Hosted by Jared Ash, bringing you in-depth conversations with the leaders shaping your community.
Today, we are going to look at building trades and labor unions and their impacts here on the East Bay. I am joined by a fifth-generation Contra Costa resident, Tim Sobranti. Tim, thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here. It's quite a background. My ancestors came to Pittsburgh in the late 1800s. And at that time, it was Black Diamond, coal country, but it soon became New York Landing because that's where the Italian immigrants from New York landed. They named it New York Landing, late 1800s, early 1900s. And then I've had relatives in Pittsburgh, Antioch. Grew up there my early childhood. And it's great to be back working in Contra Costa in my new capacity, especially given our rich history here in the county.
Nice. Tell us a little bit about your role at the unions and what is your focus, and that'll help set some context going forward.
The Contra Costa Building and Construction Trades Council is one of 21 councils around the state. The umbrella is the State Building Construction Trades Council, and we all fall under the California Labor Federation. I know we'll probably get more into that, but as it relates to Contra Costa, again, there's 21 affiliated councils. We're one of the 21. Alameda has a council. San Francisco has a council. South Bay, San Mateo. So the regional councils, and we have 20 affiliated building and construction trade unions that fall under our umbrella in Contra Costa. My role really is to work on behalf of all of our members, all of our affiliates, to try to promote the professions within the Building and Construction Trades Council, and specifically to try to get work, to try to get hours for our members that work in the field, in these crafts. That's my role, is working with them. And we do advocacy, we do PR, we do a lot of education, a lot of workforce development. It gives me the opportunity to wear a lot of different hats working with our leaders.
Tim, let's define what are those building trades, right?
The president of our council is Nick Goodwin. He is the president he's the business manager for UA 159, which is the plumbers. He's our president, represents the plumbers in Contra Costa County. Our vice president is Tristan Scholl with the laborers. Then we have our sergeant at arms, Greg Levy, with the cement masons. And then some of the others that make up our executive board come from the iron workers, the sheet metal workers, the pipe fitters, and the electricians. That's our executive board. And then we have painters and other crafts, bricklayers, elevator operator, construction, a wide variety of crafts that make up the 20 affiliates that fall under our council.
Talk about what is the difference between unions often get grouped together as a term politically, for better or worse. Police and teacher unions, firefighter unions are some of the non-building trades. You have ones for government workers, right? For city, county staff. Just talk a little bit about what the one word union means, but talk about some of the differences.
The biggest difference, I'd say, as it relates, I'll talk about specifically the building trade, is our members work in the private sector. And a lot of our members work in the refineries in Contra Costa County. We have 4 refineries. Contra Costa Building Trades is more unique than most of the other building trades councils that don't have the concentration of refineries and industrial work that we do in Contra Costa County. Our members work in those industries, in that industry that's one of the largest shares of ours. Our members work at Chevron and the Martinez Refining Company, P66 and Marathon. We have a lot of members that work there. And then we have other members that obviously work in development, whether they're building infrastructure projects or housing projects or any other type of construction. Other unions, like you identified, some that are in the public sector. I was a teacher, 24 years as an educator. So I was in the Teachers Association, governmental workers, firefighters, police. That's one section of unions. And then there's others like communication workers, the grocery clerks, UFCW, Safeway, the unionized workforce.
And the nurses.
Exactly, the nurses, that's right. And some of which nurses are public sector, others may be private sector, depending on what hospital or medical facilities. Anyone that's in a union for the most part falls under the Labor Federation, the broader umbrella of unions that are both public and private, but a building trades council specifically working for our members that almost exclusively work in the private sector.
That's great clarification. Thanks. What are the benefits to the workforce of being part of the union compared to there's plenty of construction contractors that aren't part of the union? Probably more than that. And that's a good question is what is the percentage of workers that qualify that are in a union?
Hard to tell because it's hard to quantify. I'll just say this, speaking of your first part, the benefits, it starts with the training. I think the level of training, the level of safety training, and specifically because it's inherently dangerous work. I'd say number one, the benefits to the members, the training, the portability of skills, the portability of benefits, the health care, the pension. Those are just things that come as part of being really in any union, but specifically when you're in the building trades unions, that's a real advantage. And then just in terms of, there's a reason why our members are working in the refineries. It's because it's they're highly skilled and trained, and we have apprentice programs that train up our members to do what's inherently dangerous work. Being a pipe fitter, being a boiler maker, being in any one of these industrial facilities, there's a recognition that these are dangerous jobs. There's safety not only to the workers themselves, but the community at large. You want to have the very best, highly trained workers to do that work. I think that's one of the advantages that we had. And it's interesting because I just had a conversation just this morning with a broker, a commercial broker, and talking about economic development and job creation and looking to really increase advanced manufacturing, increase clean tech and other types of construction jobs, other types of facilities. And he says, look, one of the advantages of Contra Costa County is you have the training facilities to train that workforce. Sometimes unions can get politicized or people could talk about the downsides and you get into these political debates, but he was just very pragmatic. He said, yeah, you know what? There's a cost to having a skilled and trained workforce, just like there's a cost to having a highly trained workforce in any industry. But if you're going to be doing refining, if you're going to be doing types of industrial work or advanced manufacturing, you want to have the very best. And yeah, there may be a little bit of a cost to that, but there's an added advantage in Contra Costa County and the larger East Bay that we have that type of a skilled and trained workforce that can do those types of jobs. And that makes it actually gives us a competitive advantage. We talk all the time about all the disadvantages of California. We could I'm sure you've spent many podcasts talking about those, the challenges, the problems. I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into that here, but there are also the opportunities. And I think our workforce does provide that for employers seeking to move here.
That's great. Let's dive into that economic development. How does your organization in the building trade sector, how can they help with economic development, partnering with cities, partnering with private developers, in a way that's good for the region?
We do that all the time. That's inherently a key part of my work. And as a way of background, I think as you probably know, Jared, but maybe others, because now I'm dating myself a little bit, but I previously served as a mayor, elected mayor of Dublin, was on the city council before that during a period of rapid growth, which I'm unapologetically pro-growth as it relates to not only residential, but commercial. We did that. I look at my job almost through the lens of, as a mayor, like promoting growth obviously for our members, unionized workforce, the type of growth that I'm supporting, but growth in the county. I look at that. I meet with brokers. I'll meet with landowners. I'll meet with cities, but part of inherently what we do is advocacy. A good example of that is Avaya in Pittsburgh. They're looking to build a big data center, but they have a large entitlement. The entitlement process, whether you're going through the California Energy Commission, whether you're trying to get permits through the air district, through the city, there's a lot of these different discretionary entitlements that both appointed and elected governmental agencies have. But when some of these folks know that the building trades are in support of a project, we're able to help win approval a lot of times for some of these projects. And you look at a data center, look at it this way. A data center, that's going to provide jobs for our members. We're going to build it. Our members are going to operate it. There's that. But think about all the companies, whether it's AI companies or other companies, startups that need access to power. Power is going to be the key to everything, I think, as we look in the next 20, 30, 40 years. It has a great advantage. They have their own power. Alameda has their own power. And I think some of these other data centers that have powers have an opportunity to create clusters, kind of innovation our members aren't necessarily going to work in those jobs, but those are jobs that are going to be created from our union hands that build some of these facilities. Really, the advantage that we provide is the direct advantage to our members in terms of building it, but there's a broader economic impact of some of the work that we do and some of our advocacy work, getting some of these facilities built.
And a shameless self plug, I can't help it. If you need help with entitlement work and zoning, hey, call me. That's what I actually do to make a living. This podcast is free. Tim, let's look at the other side of that related to projects. A lot of questions about the cost that the building trades, if somebody uses prevailing wage or requires organized labor, can hurt a project by raising costs and taking longer to do. How do you talk through that with potential elected officials? What should they know?
Boy, there's a lot there. I partially reject part of the premise, but I'll dissect different aspects of it. When it comes to prevailing wage, particularly as it relates to public infrastructure job projects, anytime a school district is building a facility, a utility district, water district, a city, by state law, they have to provide those are prevailing wage jobs, whether they're union or non-union. They can go 100% non-union. By law, they still have to provide prevailing wage and certain other apprentice hours from a state-approved certified apprentice program. There's certain things that they already have to do. Sometimes, especially as it relates to the public sector, and you hear sometimes, oh, if you go with the union, it's going to be 20% more. If anything is 20% more, then that means somebody is cheating, because a prevailing wage, everybody's paying within the same, if they're following the law and they have certified payroll records where everybody is working in the right classifications and you're putting people to work, it's all within the margins. It's going to be really close. So your labor costs are not going to be a major part of that. I'm a big advocate as it relates for any level of public infrastructure. And that's one of the core things that we believe in is project labor agreements or stabilization agreements that put our members to work. And again, I keep in mind, we're 35,000 members within Contra Costa County that are part of the building trades. There's an inherent benefit to the overall economy when you hire local, because the investment stays here. Some people, you hear about costs. It's like, yeah, you can bring in a low cost crew out of Modesto or out of Sacramento. They're going to come down, they're going to work, they're going to take that money home. When you put people to work who are Contra Costa residents, there's a multiplying effect about where they shop, where they live, that sort of thing. I think there's other economic elements there. As it relates to the private sector, I would also say, yes, there's certain jobs, I obviously would argue for any one of our members can do some of this work, all this work. But the reality is there's some projects that are going to pencil out better than others in terms of the workforce when you have a union workforce. Depending on the complexity, are we talking about a 3,000 square foot tilt up or some type of a small commercial one-story project? Or are we talking about something that's multi-story? When you're talking about multi-story, you're talking about systems that are a little bit more complicated. You have a lot more safety factors. Again, I would argue that even in those cases, when you're talking about projects with hundreds of units, projects that are multi-floors, projects that are a larger square footage footprint, it does make sense to have that, again, skilled and trained workforce. Does it cost a little bit more? Maybe. It could be arguable, but in the long run, in terms of you want things done correctly, you want things done right. You don't want change orders, or you don't want to come back a couple of years because some of these more complex systems weren't built the proper way. I would say you're making an investment in a local workforce and you're getting things done the right way. And I would also say on time. I think part of the delays that might be related to entitlements that don't necessarily involve unions. That just involves the entitlement process in California in general, which I'm glad it creates opportunities for you and others who help guide through the entitlement process. But as you well know through your profession, whether it's the regional agencies, the city agencies, the districts, state agencies, so many different things, I would argue that the unions are not really a part of any of those kinds of delays. We participate in the process to protect the interests of our members and the public, but we don't accept that we're necessarily causing delays. In fact, we believe our value add to any project is the fact that we can get things done on time, on budget, and done correctly.
That's good. And I think that local element is important because I know San Francisco talks about a lot of contractors will come in and even stay in temp trailers from the Central Valley for a couple of weeks at a time and work on a project. And they're all leaving and there's a lack of that local. And part of that is the cost of living and everything else.
I would say this is also, I'll talk about the educational element too. And again, I come back from the schools. It's interesting having conversations with some folks and they'll say, hey, and they'll be agreeing with, we're having a positive conversation. Everyone's in agreement. Hey, not everyone's going to go off to college. What you're doing in terms of the apprentice programs is right. You're creating opportunities for our high school graduates. Oh, absolutely. And that way they can get a profession and good salary and good benefits, all these things. Yes, yes, and yes. And then when it comes to actually building something, it's, yeah, but we got to cut costs and they don't see, no, this is part of the continuum. We're investing in our local communities through the schools, through these programs. Then they give back by working in these industries. It's a multiplying effect. The other thing that we do, I talked a little about the refineries, but we advocate for oil, power, and gas. Those industries specifically are refiners, both our crude refiners and our renewable refiners, which we think is a huge value add for the entire state. Because as we see these refineries go, look at what's happening in Benicia. 18% of their budget is going to be wiped out this year. I, having been a mayor, I was mayor during the Great Recession and times were tough, but I never lost 18% of our budget overnight. And those were tough times. Mayor Young and the council there, they got some tough decisions ahead. And as it relates to public safety and other programs, the work that we do, advocating again directly for our members, but also the economic engine that some of these facilities provide. And again, we'll go hand in hand to Sacramento because they're easy targets for politicians and others that, don't like these industries. And look, we are both and when it comes to energy. We believe in clean energy. We believe in, but it's kind of like you get into these either or conversations about one or the other. And it's no, hey, we need to refine as cleanly as possible and be mindful of environmental stewardship. But we also need to be looking for new technologies, green technologies, so we can provide these energy sources. But we take great pride that our members work in these industries that provide fuel to our airports, that allow our folks, the airline, the aviation industry in the Bay, that provide our motorists the ability to commute and revenue for communities. Again, I'm glad to be a part of this work on a variety of different fronts.
That's a unique perspective that I think we hear in the East Bay, where you have a lot of people that politically are into renewable energy, into alternatives, moving off of oil and gas. I am a lot of ways one, but I also get, and I could say Bob Brown from the Western States Petroleum Alliance, which I know Supervisor Candace Anderson, we've all talked about this, is you need plenty of time. You can't shut off oil tomorrow. We're addicted to it in so many ways in this country, and that's a whole other conversation, but it is an economic engine here, and you can't expect it to go down overnight. And Benicia, 18% is a lot. And I think it's 10% of the county budget. And it's even more in Contra Costa County. I think it's 30% of the county budget.
Yeah.
It's
big numbers.
That's a whole other conversation. We'll circle back to that another episode.
But I would just say this. I'm all for renewables. Number one, I love the work that they're doing at P66 and Marathon in terms of especially P66 with sustainable aviation fuel and other types of the renewable fuels. But again, Chevron and MRC, there's the market for the crude. And I would just say, when one of, I make an environmental argument for it, because if MRC or Chevron, God forbid, shut down, not only would you have just a disaster in terms of not only our members losing jobs, other people losing jobs, the economic calamity that would occur. The other aspect is, now what are you doing? You're shipping or you're not off the product tomorrow. We still have our vehicles. Now you're going to ship it from China or other parts of the world. I had a conversation with Senator Grayson recently, and Senator Grayson talked about how he was in Greece and on a legislative delegation. And he says, you go to the refinery there and they do not have nearly the amount of environmental safety safeguards. And Greece probably has more safeguards than parts of Asia, Africa, other parts of Europe that maybe have even worse safeguards. So if you shut down in California, where we have all these high standards, and then you move that production overseas, and then you bring it here on dirty ships, like, there's an environmental argument to be made that really we should be doing as much of this in California as possible. But I also want to be clear, I'm not strictly saying oil is the only energy solution. We should be all in on battery, all in on wind, all in on solar. Like, it's all of the above. And I think that's, again, we started talking about data centers, and power is everything, and having access to it in a variety of different forms, thermal, all these different things. And I think for me, again, I believe it's good public policy, wearing like this is the right policy approach. And obviously for our members who are going to do that work, it's advocating for them, but we advocate alongside our private sector partners, because those are the ones making the investments and providing the jobs for our members.
I know we got sidetracked there. I want to come back to workforce development. You talked a lot about the education and training programs. High schools, community colleges, whether you're talking to students or faculty, what do you want them to know about career opportunities, about how to enter a training program, about how you could partner with them? I know, 3 big questions.
Tackle it any way you want. I'd say first, so again, coming from K-12, so many big mistakes were made 20 plus years ago when many of these school districts eliminated their shop programs, eliminated all of these things, the things that we grew up with. They're just standard. Like, those are just part of the school curriculum, and not every student took those classes, but a lot of students did. And then they had more of an industry pipeline. And then I think 20 years ago, roughly, we entered this kind of no child left behind era of education, where everybody was going to graduate from a UC with a computer science degree, get into STEM. Now, you got all these computer science with AI. So many of those jobs are being replaced. You had engineers coming out of these schools that had never built anything. We did a disservice to an entire generation of students where they weren't even really aware of these opportunities, or these opportunities were discouraged. Oh, you don't go into the shop or into the trades. If somebody can go through 13 years of public education, kindergarten through 12th grade, and never be exposed to a shop class, again, I'm all for higher education. I have a degree from Sacramento State. Go Hornets, Stingers out. I'm all about that. 4-year degree, absolutely. We need that. And I'm all about promoting that. But we all know that's not for everybody. The first message is, hey, let's bring back some shop classes. Let's invest in real workforce opportunities where we know that AI is not going to fix your plumbing. We know that AI is not going to build some of these things. It's coming for a lot of jobs, but I don't think any job is 100% safe, but jobs in our industry are probably safer than maybe other industries. That's number one. I would say number 2 is you have to expose students when they're graduating high school and in community college to these as viable pathways into different apprentice programs, whether it's the construction trades or anything else, but I'll speak specifically to the trades, is the promotion. One of the things that was always tragic to me, after I turned out as mayor, I became a community college trustee for Chabot Las Positas. And one of the things that I always found unfortunate is if you had somebody who came to the community college, and again, we're preparing students, go to the CSU, go to the UC, transfer to a 4-year, or let's get you a certificate and make you immediately employable with the skills that you want. The most tragic thing is somebody that goes to community college for 3, 4, 5 years, takes a bunch of classes, he gets a bunch of units, but then they're not necessarily on a transfer path. But they also don't have a certificate for employment. So to me, it's working with the community colleges and their guidance counselors and their deans to be able to direct students. Hey, if somebody's not directly on an immediate transfer path within 2 to 3 years, let's get them into a certificate program. Let's get them into an apprentice program so they can become immediately employable. And then the other thing I would say to employers is utilize your community colleges and utilize the trades to provide the curriculum to meet your workforce needs, because we have the facilities that can do that. And unlike the CSU or the UC, if a company comes in and goes to Cal State East Bay and says, hey, we want you to provide training for our workforce, and they write them $1 million check, they have to, by law, deposit that check into the general fund. It can't specifically go to that. At the community college, the employer could say, look, this is exactly what I need. I need you, Los Medanos, I need you, DBC, to offer this course. Or they could work directly with us as an apprentice or one of our affiliates, or we partner with the community college to run the program for them. And we could provide that level of direct training. I think the message is all the above. Is it starts the K-12, let's bring shops back. And then I think at the community college, let's direct folks that aren't necessarily immediately on a path to a 4-year, let's get them into something. And then it's a message to employers like, look, we're here. We will provide the training that you need to meet your workforce needs. Utilize our training centers to do that.
Well, my favorite classes in high school were electronics and wood shop.
Yes.
And I don't use those skills, and I'm actually not very handy, but I had a ton of fun in them and just tinkering with stuff. It's STEM in a lot of ways, putting those pieces together. And I know, and I've talked about it on here before with some of the water folks, in the water sector and wastewater, the average person in those industries in this country is a 68-year-old white male who doesn't even use Excel, let alone Google Docs or AI. And that is a profession. I put some stats together with some other organizations that talk about these are good paying jobs. You can go out and get some simple training now and come out of high school or a community college degree before you even worry about your engineering degree and get a decent paying job here in the East Bay.
I love that. I love that example. It's spot on multiple fronts. Number one, yeah, all the different job opportunities that are there. I think also when it comes to water and wastewater and how we utilize, that's also a source of power and energy that if done properly, these things feed themselves. That as you get into recycling and renewable, there's also private sector utility from that. There's ample jobs that are there in those industries. But I really like your last point so much. It's a lot of times, again, I've even done it even on this podcast, and I've done it plenty of other times, talk about like college or career. It can be college and career, and being a union apprentice and even a journeyman for a time, and then going off and pursuing your degree. That is absolutely something that can be done. Like, I think sometimes people thinking like, you're either going to do this for 30 years or go to college and do that for 30 years. But if you don't want to rack up student debt and you maybe come from your family doesn't necessarily have the means, your parents to put you through, and you can want to fund your way to go to college yourself, become a union apprentice, become a union journeyman, take some classes at night, and you could pay your way through school. And while you're an apprentice, they're paying you while you're learning. And then think about how much more utility you'll have as an engineer or someone who's in construction management if you actually worked on a crew and at one point were an apprentice or a journeyman. Sometimes I say, look, if you don't know what you necessarily know what you want to major and what you want to do for school, hey, but you're handy with your hands, you don't mind getting dirty, working outside, come join one of our programs. It doesn't mean you're locked in for life as in the trades. I was having a conversation with a high-level school district official in a district in Contra Costa at the assistant superintendent's level, pretty high up. Started out as an Ironman apprentice and worked as an Ironman for a few years. And then decided, well, it wasn't necessarily the path going to go, went down a different path, but you know what? Able to pay his way through school and had so many different handy skills as he made his way through. I think we have to look at the workforce flow and you know this, I know this, very few people get a job and work in that job for 40 years or get a job and work in that industry for 40 years. Like sometimes the lines are shifting and we can be a part of that journey for someone.
That's even come up in hospitality workforce development and hospital medical workforce development is that apprenticeship and starting out, right? If you're going to TVC or CSU, Las Positas, why are you working at Old Navy? Nothing against Old Navy, sorry.
Mhm.
Instead of can you work at a hotel if you're interested in hospitality part-time? Very flexible schedules because hotels are open 24/7. If you are interested in going to school to become a nurse or a doctor, can you start out as like an X-ray tech and be going to school, get that shorter term training, and then be creating that while you're still in school, getting to that next step. Same thing you were talking about with becoming an engineer or the level of education here.
If you're going to be an engineer, why don't you build something first like that? Actually, hands on. Think about how much more of an advantage you'll have in the job market. I love the examples that you just gave. I know even for myself, again, now I'm even dating myself even more. When I was coming out of college and figuring out what I wanted to do, one of the things I was considering of pursuing was sports broadcasting and completely different. But I needed to work, I had to pay bills. And so I went to work. I said, maybe I'll become a sports writer covering high school sports. In other words, I could take a job on campus. I could take a job retail. And again, nothing wrong with those jobs. They pay bills. And some people, if you want to be in retail management, great. But I'm like, if I want to be in sports, let me get the entry level job in sports. Let me be a sports writer covering high school, covering little league, covering so I could get a taste of it. And I feel like what we provide could be that for those that want to pursue other careers down the line, that you want to be in management, say in a refinery or in management in an industrial space, coming through the trades and getting that experience will then prepare you better for those positions of management than if you just come out of the college path. And the other thing is, if you have no desire to do any of those things, you can be gainfully employed with the middle class, upper middle class, with a pension, with benefits, be able to provide for your families and do it here locally. Those are just, again, the benefits that we tout and by the work that we do.
I would encourage everybody to just think about how they could look at workforce development for the overall community going forward. Let's talk about politics here in the East Bay. How do you look at local candidates or local ballot measures, whether for state assembly, city council? Union endorsements are both good and bad. Talk about what is your perspective on elected officials, the endorsement? What is your
Criteria,
role?
like,
How is it
yeah.
good? What's the benefits?
I'll start with measures because that's a little bit more simplistic on our end. First off, when it comes to measures, usually the state propositions, most of the time, although we're not obligated to, we'll follow the lead of the state building trade. So when you have a state proposition, we'll let them generally take that up, and then we'll either endorse locally, maybe not get involved if we choose not to, but that's at a different level. A good example, Contra Costa Community College Board is considering a bond measure. And we'll find out, and maybe by the time this post, maybe it's already will have been decided, and that bond measure might be on an upcoming ballot. That's close to $1 billion of work that our members are going to be doing. And it checks about every box you can imagine. It provides man hours for our members that are going to be doing the work. It provides more workforce opportunities. We're going to look at that, and that'll be like a no-brainer, and we will be all in, right, for something like that. And then there's other things that you will evaluate as a measure. Is it good public policy? Will it benefit our members? We try not to get involved. Building trades are a little bit more narrow in their focus in the sense of the labor fed that has public sector unions and other unions. They tend to take more positions because they have a broader membership. Our portfolio is a little bit more specific. Again, we're a little bit unique in Contra Costa because we're going to look at things that's related to oil, power, and gas a little bit differently than maybe other unions in different parts of the state. As it relates to candidates, let's say this. We have to start with the premise that you're very rarely going to get 100% agreement on every issue with anyone. So you have to respect that fact. The biggest thing is, do they share your values, and are they going to be accessible to when you pick up the phone or you send them a message? Are you going to be able to have a conversation and get a fair hearing? That at the most basic level, that's really what you want is somebody share your values for they're for infrastructure. They support a unionized workforce. They see the value in that. And there's someone that's going to be accessible. And again, not that they're going to just do everything you say. That's not how this works. I think there's a perception, these union bosses, and then that's not really how things work in the real world. Very rarely does that kind of stuff really play in. It's really more of a conversation. You just need to be able to know that if I pick up the phone to a mayor, a council member, a school board member, that they're going to hear you out and they're going to give it full and fair consideration. And then they're going to vote their conscience and do what's right. And obviously you're going to evaluate that down the line. It's, hey, and again, it's not, do they do what I say? It's their votes will demonstrate whether we have shared values on issues and on the issues that are important to our members. And if they show through their actions that, yeah, they're valuing infrastructure, they're valuing investment, and they're valuing opportunities for our members to be able to capture some of that work and provide for their families, then people are more likely to get our endorsement. But if there's people that don't share those values, or they're just not accessible, or they're not going to give you a fair hearing because they go in and they're like, oh, union's bad, or, oh, they have a certain way, then we're more likely to support someone else. And there's nothing personal. Like, I think it's just a matter of how do we protect the interests of our members in the public space? And that's how we look at things. Even though here we are, we're sitting in January, by the time this is up, maybe it's February, but we're already into election year. So those conversations are already happening, and looking at the landscape, folks are coming forward and asking for our support. We're going to be making those decisions in the coming months. It is a process, but I'll say this, we have an endorsement committee that any one of our affiliates can be a part of. It's an open process. The candidates that ask to come in, or those that we invite in, have the opportunity to meet. We have a conversation, very much like we're having a conversation. We get a sense. If they're new, they're not incumbents. They're first time running. Have to take folks at their word for what, they say they believe it. Maybe they have actions from the planning commission or their professional work or things they've been involved with that you can gauge how supportive they might be. For those that are in office seeking reelection, then you can evaluate, okay, have they been accessible? Have they been supportive when we've asked for certain things? Again, recognizing that no one's going to be lockstep. Everybody has a lot of considerations when they vote, but we hope that we will be high up among those considerations when deciding how to vote on things.
I think that's important as you talk about the relationship, right? That you're happiest if somebody's communicating with you. And I tell people that as a government relations professional. If you're going to vote against me, that's fine, but talk it through with me. Explain to me why you're going to vote against the project for whatever reason. That's important to me. And I want to be able to reach you and just have a conversation and build that relationship, because it's not always about one vote. It's about where are we going as the East Bay altogether.
Absolutely. Yes, that's right.
Look at how unions have evolved politically over decades and their purpose. I know the building trades are a little different than some of the other ones, but if you go back to the founding of the AFL-CIO movement and other things, it was factory workers with dim light conditions, right? No safety features, little pay, long hours. Where do you just see, at least from the building trades perspective, the overall value and shift, and where do you see it going? We'll take it out with this.
I'll have to say this. Some of those examples are obviously, they're dramatic examples from the past. But I think we kid ourselves if we think we're in an enlightened time today where people aren't exploited, whether it's the building trades or whether it's outside of the building trades. But I'll just speak specifically to the building trades, where somebody might be misclassified in terms of their wages, where that may be on the prevailing wage scale, which basically just sets And based on the level of the work that's done, how much somebody should be paid based on that level of work. So you might have work that's actually done at a higher level. People should be paying at a higher rate and they're paid at a much lower rate. And a lot of times these might be first generation, maybe English isn't their first language, and they get that's wage step. They should be making a certain amount, they're making far less. For us, those are the types of issues that we deal with some contractors that are bad actors, that are problematic. We want to, part of what we do is enforcing the wage laws that benefit union members and non-union members. And it's, look, this is the law. This is the wages that folks should be paying. We're still dealing with a lot of those very kind of bread and butter issues about, hey, how much should be paid into someone's pension or health care? Or, hey, is there state law requires a certain amount of certified apprentices on a job? Are there apprentices on these jobs? Are there the right amount of workers on a job? Or are they trying to, because those have safety implications, both for the workers themselves and those that move into some of these properties, be they residential or occupying commercial space. Those are some of the bread and butter issues that a lot of folks don't see, because they might see the politics, or they'll see the endorsement, or they'll see maybe some of our members showing up in a meeting advocating for something. But there's other things that are behind the scenes that people don't see on a daily basis as it relates to just kind of general advocacy, whether it's working with agency staff, whether it's working with compliance officers with the county or state level, labor relations board, that sort of thing, that our business managers and business agents also take up on behalf of our members.
I think that's important. And a few months ago, I did a podcast on human trafficking. And, we all think of Jeffrey Epstein and anything that he was doing with young women, but they talked a lot about labor and people who are working for contracting companies are being forced to. And you're talking at a different level, making sure they're paid correctly and understand their rights and are safe. But it did come up that companies aren't necessarily doing what is in the best interest of their employees. And so just hearing you talk about that made me think about how important it is to make sure the safety is on the project, that they do have the number of people, that workers are treated fairly. I appreciate that.
That's an important part of the work, again, that not only we just do in the trades, the building trades, the labor movement as a whole on behalf of their members, whether they be food and commercial workers, whether they be bus drivers, public sector, private sector. That's the role, a fundamental role that we play, not just 100 years ago, today as well.
Tim Sobrante from the Contra Costa Building Trades Association. We appreciate you being here today. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Capstone Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Jared Ash and Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Leave us a review and share this episode with a friend.